Welcome to another episode of the Feature Presentation Podcast, where every week we take a deep dive into the trenches of independent filmmaking. I am your host, Derek Diamond. If you haven't yet, be sure to check out last week's episode. I had a wonderful conversation with voice actor Miss Laura Faye Smith, and we really dove into all different facets of the world of acting, not just voice acting, but acting for film, improv, theater. I don't think there's anything we didn't talk about when it comes to acting. But for this week, I've been excited to chat with this person since we booked the interview. One of my favorite filmmakers, and not just one of my favorite filmmakers, but one of my favorite people, because he has been such an immense help to me and many others in the Pensacola area. Filmmaker, screenwriter, director, Mr. Stephen Wise. Sir, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Derek, for that embarrassing introduction. But
oh no, it's well deserved, and it's funny because I was talking with Jason Robbins, our mutual friend, and we haven't done a podcast together in I think 2 years.
It's been since before the pandemic hit.
Yeah, which is almost like another lifetime. It feels like. So how have things been? And I wanted to start off with a little known short film that you've become pretty infamous for, Sur'vi, which we just passed the 5-year anniversary of when it was filmed. Does it feel like 5 years?
In some respects, yes, but in others, no. When I see Gabby Faulkner, who was 10 at the time when we shot the film, and I see her as a teenager now, it's like, okay, some time has passed.
What do you think was the biggest lesson that you learned on set of Sur'vi?
Not to direct and produce at the same time. Or at least if I have to be a producer, to have another producer on board as well to relieve some of the responsibilities, because when you're trying to do both, one takes precedence over the other. And unfortunately, this was such a big undertaking, and we had so many concerns, not the least of which was the weather, because we were shooting entirely outdoors and a thunderstorm was, bearing down us. So just the logistics alone, I was just neck deep in that, where I should have been concentrating on the creative. I mean, it turned out okay, but it was a frustrating endeavor to have to worry about the business end of things when I really needed to take care of, creative aspects as well.
And that can be the tough thing about doing multiple aspects of the film. And, we call it wearing different hats, because you have to take off one, put on the other, and you lose focus on what should be your primary job. So it is what it is, but the film turned out great. I give Sur'vi credit of, my movie, The Parker Syndrome, would not have happened had you not given me the opportunity to work on Sur'vi, because I credit that as being what reinvigorated that desire in order to be a part of it. Because it's almost like, and I don't want to entirely speak for you, but when I'm on a film set, it almost feels like I'm home. Like it feels right.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, making a movie is incredibly stressful, and you just got so many worries that you're trying to deal with all at once, and not the least of which is trying to stay focused on what's in front of you. But everybody, as the director, everybody comes to you with questions, and you don't necessarily have the answers for everything. But you still have to have that vision and have to have that leadership. I lucked out that with Sur'vi and with other projects that I've worked on, since, that we had really good crew and cast, and everybody really put everything into it. And that's so important. If you have people that just don't want to be there, it really makes life tough.
A film set is something that you cannot have people that don't want to be there, because it's a grind. When you're on set all day. It could be 8 hours, it could be 10, however long it takes to get it done. So it's one of those things that I think you learn very quickly whether or not you like it.
Yeah. And it's a bonding experience too. Even though you might just spend a few days with people that you literally just met, once you're finished with it, it's like going through the trenches in wartime or something, where suddenly, oh, you've got this bond that will never be broken. Well, at least until the next project comes along, and then kind of do the same thing with that group. But it's kind of like a family, and we had our Sur'vi family, and fortunately, a good many of us have been able to work on other things since then, and hopefully we'll be able to work on things coming up very soon.
For sure. Yeah, it's exciting that, I know COVID really it shut everything down essentially, but I know for here it shut pretty much all production down. You weren't hearing about anything. So it's good that things are starting to really pick back up.
Well, and, I had to shoot this other project that fortunately we just finished post-production on Blackwater Blues. We were in production during COVID, and so we had to follow COVID protocols. Now, we shot this in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, and had the backing of the Film Commission there, but everybody had to get tested like the week before or several days before, really. And everybody, we had masks, and we had to follow strict safety procedures, because that was the last thing that we'd want, is to have our cast and crew infected. That would not be a good thing.
Yeah, it was a lot to work around, but I think the final product, it turned out well, despite the challenges that COVID brought. It was still it's still entertaining to watch. So I think that speaks for the cast and crew who were involved and were able to work around all the numerous challenges.
Yeah, we had a good group of people there working on that.
So before we get into the heart of why I asked you to come on the show, is to talk about film festivals, because Sur'vi has had just an amazing run in the film festival circuit. What was it that initially made you want to be a filmmaker and get into the film business?
I might as well ask me my life story. I've been making movies since I was a little kid. I've been enamored with films and television since I can remember, and been wanting to tell stories all my life. When I was 8 years old, my best friend who lived across the street called me up and said, "Hey, you want to make a movie?" And I'm like, okay, sure. How? And it turned out his older brother, who was a teenager at the time, had a Super 8 camera and needed people in his film. So he didn't care that the little 8-year-old across the street was over, working on it. And so the group of us just continued doing our own films. And that was just a passion. I knew that that's what I wanted to go into. And I was fortunate enough to get into UCF's film school, and which was a wonderful experience, and met some terrific people through there that I'm still friends with. And many of them have gone on to bigger and better things than I. So
at what point during your journey into film, because I say on the show pretty much every week, there's not really a how-to guidebook on how to become a filmmaker. Everybody kind of has their own way, their unique journey to get into it. Where along the lines were you introduced to film festivals?
Well, in film school, actually, to some degree, even when I was a little kid, one of the films that we made, I forgot how old I was at the time, maybe 10, 11. There was a magazine that was dedicated to Super 8 filmmakers. And my friend's older brother, Mike, had directed this film. It was a ripoff of Star Wars, just plain and simple. I mean, we had lightsaber fights and everything. We called it Galactic Wars. And he submitted it to this contest that this magazine was, holding, and we got an honorable mention from it. So that was really my first experience with any type of contest. But when I was in film school, it was kind of expected, if you did finish a film, which it's kind of a miracle if, as a film student, if you actually got something done, to enter it into festivals. at that time, there weren't very many of them. I mean, there were the big ones, the Sundance Film Festival and whatnot. But in Orlando, of course, we had the Florida Film Festival, which was pretty major, and a couple smaller ones. And then nearby was the Fort Lauderdale Film Festival, which was a lot of my peers ended up, going down there for that. But since that time period, which is many years ago, the technology had changed to where it allowed filmmakers to enter into more, because at the time, you had to just find a list of film festivals, usually in magazines that were dedicated to independent filmmaking, and they would publish a list with contact information. You would have to write to them, get a printed application, fill it out, and then mail them your actual film. And usually you had to, you were shooting on 16 millimeter at this time, and you had to have a 16 millimeter final print, which for anybody who knows anything about actual film, that is expensive. Every step of the way is expensive. And so, and there were still a lot of filmmakers out there that, just were not able to get their films into festivals because, as the number of festivals grow, so do the number of filmmakers. And so you end up with just an overwhelming amount of people trying to submit, as opposed to what a festival can actually hold. If you try to get into Sundance, for instance, you're dealing with literally thousands and thousands of competitors, and they're just, it's no way that they can go through all that. So, they basically, the big ones have to find excuses to say no.
And it's really been amazing because, I remember growing up hearing about Sundance, but I didn't think there would be any other festivals in the country. I just knew of Sundance and that was really it. I didn't think much of it. And through, the Parker syndrome and seeing what's, the success that Sur'vi's had, and in conversations that I've had with you, film festivals are all over the world. There's some over in France, in India, in Japan. There's so many festivals in various countries around the world. It's been amazing. And it's like you said, with technology, now that everything's digital and you can just simply upload your film. Yeah. And the cost can add up quite a bit, as I've learned. But it's just been amazing to see the growth of festivals around the world.
Well, and again, it was technology allowed that. When Without a Box came along, I think it was in the mid 90s, I want to say. It was literally the first website that allowed you to enter film festivals. Initially, you couldn't upload the film there. It was just strictly a submission process. And you had to, fill out the application. And then, so it was just an easier way of filling out the application. The issue was that they patented their software, their coding. And anytime anybody else would try to create a similar type of website, they would sue. And they became the go-to place. Well, as is typical with just a lot of things, when you're the only one in town, you don't have to innovate. And they did add a few things like, okay, now you can have, upload your film to watch. Oh, you can have them download the film for a fee. But what they started doing was they were charging every single festival through the nose. And so small festivals that were coming into their own, they couldn't afford it. And so they ended up having to drop in. If you weren't going through Without a Box, you didn't exist, basically. There was no other way at that point that people had means to submit. So Without a Box was kind of killing a lot of festivals. And then came Film Freeway out of Canada. and they basically thumbed their nose at Without a Box, which, by the way, was purchased by Amazon, I want to say. It was purchased by one of the biggies, but they Film Freeway challenged them and won, and then others have come along since then. Without a Box no longer exists; it disappeared. When the big festivals like Sundance started switching over, that was the death knell. But Film Freeway had just such an easy, user-friendly interface, and had things that were just really a nice way, both for the filmmaker and for the festivals. And so you could, let's say you had a festival that was a nonprofit, was not charging a fee, to enter, or charging ticket prices. Film Freeway allowed you to list your festival for no charge. But the problem then became that everybody under the sun created a film festival. And so it's really hard to tell what's legit and what's not. And that's kind of the other end of things, is trying to weed through all the garbage to try to get to things that are legit.
Yeah, and that's very true. And you mentioning the story Without a Box, I mean, that advice can be given to filmmakers and be given to anybody. If you don't innovate and try to be better, you're not going to last. Mm-hmm. Because look at Skype. It was the standard. Yeah. I mean, you look at Skype. It was really the only game in town as far as chatting online. Like, I couldn't imagine doing the show over Skype. It would be terrible. Yeah. And then Zoom comes along and changes the game. And I know some people still use Skype, but it's not really relevant anymore. And I knew of Without a Box, but Film Freeway has just been, it makes the process so much easier. Mm-hmm. So I know you introduced me to it when I wanted to submit the Parker Syndrome, and really kind of helped me navigate through it. And I learned really how easy it was. So I'd say to any filmmaker, like, I think, festivals are still very important. I know a lot of them are online only, but there's nothing quite like going to a festival and seeing your movie played on a giant screen.
Well, unfortunately, COVID had the effect of a lot of festivals had to go online only, which means, okay, they were still showing films, but they had to find another venue, another way to get it to the public. And so that created the need for different platforms, and I can't name any off the top of my head, but there are a number of them that do online film festivals where you can sit at home and watch them on your computer, and it's really nice. And some you have to pay a fee, and they do monetize, but it still requires an audience to make an effort, where if you're really into films, especially independent films, those online festivals are kind of a cool thing. But there is something to be said about going to a venue, especially if it's in a theater, and being able to sit there and have that experience.
Well, and you also have the networking opportunities too, of talking with other filmmakers and getting to pick their brain on, if you see a film that just it blew you away, and they do Q&As after their film is played, you can approach that filmmaker and say, hey, how did you do this? What were the steps you took to do that? That's the advantage to me of going to a festival in person. And I agree with you. There's still a cool aspect if you're a fan of films, getting to watch them online, because you can watch them on your computer, on your TV. Like, that's very convenient. But if you're a filmmaker, I don't think it can replicate that in-person experience.
Well, and what you said about networking is really true to a certain point, and it depends on the festival itself, because there's some really big festivals that offer a lot of opportunity. The Orlando Film Festival, I got to give a shout out to them. Um, they do it's a full week of programming, and they do panels and different pitch sessions where you learn how to pitch your movie, and then you compete, and they have a different day where you come and you pitch in front of different people, and they give you feedback, and then of course you can win if the award. But they hold that in a movie theater right down in downtown Orlando, and take over several of the screens, like I said, for a full week. And it's just a wonderful experience. But there are also little tiny festivals that, they hold in, dance halls or a hotel meeting room or whatever. Nothing against that. It's just that's the size that they are capable of putting out. And so it offers different things. I've gone to festivals where I was the only one there. And I've gone to festivals where there's hundreds of people at a time, and they have celebrity guests and after parties, and it's the whole shebang. So there's a full spectrum of what constitutes a film festival.
I really want to go to the Orlando Film Festival at some point, even if I don't have anything playing in it. You mentioning the workshops and learning how to pitch your movie, that's what most, if not all, festivals should offer, because as you know, with film, you learn by doing. Like you can take all the classes you want, and I think they're great. I think master class is incredible. I think actual film classes are great too, but it doesn't replicate physically doing it, being on a set, working with the camera, working with the actors, working with the audio. It's the same thing with learning the business side, because there is that side to it. So I think that's invaluable knowledge.
It is, yeah. And festivals that give you that opportunity are really, worthwhile.
So going back to Sur'vi, once it started, making its festival run, it just caused it had an incredible run. It had over 20 awards, and was shown in selected to over 60 film festivals worldwide. How does that make you feel?
It was kind of surreal because, I had the good fortune of being able to afford, in this case, to submit. And, I use a strategy, which we can talk about later if you want, but when it started getting accepted into festivals, I'm like, okay, cool. And there were some that I was expecting, a lot of local festivals or local-ish, regional festivals. And, some that were genre only. So, the film kind of straddles science fiction and fantasy. It's more of a, speculative fiction without really narrowing down the genre per se. So it was kind of hard to classify in some cases, but I threw it out there to different types of festivals. And so when it started getting accepted, it was like, oh, cool. Oh, it's another one. Cool. Yeah. And then when it started winning awards, like, wow, this is really neat, for a film that in some ways it felt thrown together. But it really was just something that I wanted to do something. I just wanted to make a film, and what didn't really have high aspirations with it, but it turned out, to where, people were appreciating the elements that were in it. It won for costume design repeatedly. It won for music score repeatedly. It won for poster repeatedly. Several of the actors won acting awards. The cinematography was acknowledged. The various the production design, and of course, then it won some like overall categories: best in show, or best picture, or best whatever, best science fiction or fantasy film. And there were some other awards that were given that were just kind of off the wall type of things. But this was all across the world that we were getting awards from. And when they started getting awards from other countries, like, oh, okay, this, so maybe people are seeing some good in it, because as a filmmaker, you hope for the best, but you don't know if anybody's going to connect with it or what you make is any good. It's sometimes very difficult to be objective about your work.
And it was really inspiring when Sur'vi was at the peak of its run, because I felt like every other day on Facebook I'd see Sur'vi has been selected to this festival or it's won this award, and it's like man, that really it just makes me want to go out and make something that can maybe be half as good as Sur'vi was. So no, I think the whole experience was inspiring. You when you get a great cast and a great crew together, they all mesh well. Yeah, there were a couple of challenges, but what film doesn't have that? Yours was weather. Like there's always some type of challenge to overcome. It's just, what do you do to adapt to the circumstances? And
we had breaking swords. Every time we stage a shot with the battle between the sword and the staff, that sword would snap in half, and our props people would have to go and repair it. And fortunately, we had several duplicates of the fake swords. Not the hero sword, which was a real one, but the battle swords. But that was a challenge. Just fighting the heat and fighting the rain, and that's what you get when you have a screenwriter that doesn't listen to the director. And when the director says, I want to have indoor shots, and the screenwriter says, no, it's going to be completely out in the woods. So
it all worked out, though.
Yeah,
there was some shade, so it wasn't like completely in the sun. So there was at least that.
Well, we had it was overcast for quite a while there too.
That too. So you mentioned your strategy as far as what festivals you submitted Sur'vi to. So talk to me a little bit about what went into the strategic planning of submitting Sur'vi to these various festivals.
Okay, well, one thing to consider is, as I said, I targeted regions, the regional, because if it's within driving distance, they're going to, the festival people, depending on what, how many films get submitted to them, there's a lot of different criteria that they're going to go under. But ultimately, they want to sell tickets. And, so let's say if it's a genre festival, that just focuses on science fiction or fantasy or horror or whatever, of course, they're going to look at the genre first. But they're also going to look at, is this local? Is this a local filmmaker who may have family and friends and crew and cast and other hangers on that will want to come and see the film? And so, they give away, a couple free passes for the filmmaker, but everybody else has to pay an entry fee. So if you can count on this film, it was made locally here and it's of good quality, it's just as good quality as something that's made across the country, they're likely to take your film because they're hoping that you're going to bring people that are going to buy tickets. So that's one thing. I mean, that's a purely from a business standpoint and very cynical way of looking at things. But from a strategic standpoint, that's something to take into consideration as a filmmaker, because you have to pay an entry fee. And that entry fee, I mean, it could be free, unlikely, but it could be. But you're likely to, pay up to $30, $40, $50 for an entry fee, depending on what the festival is. This is just for a short film. And so one thing I did was went on to Film Freeway, and you can favorite, these to where it's like, okay, notify me when this thing is coming live, because it might not be, it might be in the run right now or have just finished its run, but it's going to start up again in a few months. So I want to be able to enter it early to catch the discounts for the entry fee. I don't want to pay top dollar um, for entering, late. So, in fact, there were some that I skipped just because it was, the final deadline and it cost a fortune. Some other strategies, like I said, were look at the genre. That's a mistake that I see all the time running the Pensacon Short Film Festival, and I've participated and ran some others. And you put out, here are the genres that we accept, and then you get something completely different. It might be a terrific film, but you can't accept it because it doesn't fit the programming. So, there's the Fairhope Film Festival, I think it is. It's over in Fairhope, Alabama. That's kind of a general festival. Using this as an example, for a festival like that, you kind of have to look at what they've chosen in the past, because they're not telling you specifically, we only take dramas, or we only take comedies, or we only take whatever. They might be open to different types of genres. But if you do a science fiction film and you're submitting to that kind of festival, the chances are they're not going to take a science fiction film. Or if they do include sci-fi, it's going to be just a couple films as opposed to their entire programming. So the chances of you getting selected are low. Another thing to consider is the size of the festival. I'm not going to enter Sur'vi into the Sundance Film Festival, just not. It'll get lost in the shuffle. I took a chance on the New Orleans Film Festival, did not get accepted. That's another major festival. I did not enter it into the Florida Film Festival because that's a major festival. They take just hundreds, if not thousands, of submissions, and they only have so many time slots. So that's just something, to consider. I looked at the longevity of the festival. Now, this is something it's kind of a double-edged sword here. Newer festivals are probably not well known and are going to have fewer entries. So the chances of you getting selected are higher. But with new festivals, especially the first year, is it real? Is it actually a real thing? Is your film going to be shown? And honestly, there were a few festivals that Sur'vi got accepted into that I don't know if it was a real festival or not, because I wasn't there. There was one festival that I just did not enter it into because it more and more it seemed like a scam. And the more it was in Las Vegas, and I actually called the hotel where they said they were holding it, and the hotel didn't know anything about it. So do your research. That's really important. And, but you have to just weigh different factors. If this is a first time festival, is it in do they have it listed as being in a theater? Do they have a venue listed? Film Freeway has been cracking down on a lot of these online only, that they don't actually show the film online. All they're doing is taking your money and accepting it into a festival that doesn't exist. They may or may not give out awards. Another thing to avoid, and I kind of got caught into this trap a little bit, just because it's like, well, I'll give this festival a chance. There are festivals out there that charge for each category. So you have to enter into the short film category, but then if you want to be considered for the best director, you have to pay another fee. Best actor, another fee. Best screenplay, another fee. So one festival, you can rack up hundreds of dollars in entry fees just for the sake of trying to get an award for different categories. To me, that's a scam. If legitimate festivals, they're going to take your film, they're going to say, okay, yeah, this film qualifies for what we're doing. And then they're going to make a determination of what awards to give out. So it's, and you really shouldn't be thinking about awards anyways, as far as entering it. The in my opinion, the reason to enter is for people to see your film. And then beyond that, the networking aspect and, everything else that comes along. Awards are nice. Don't get me wrong. They're nice. But you make a film, you want people to see it.
That was actually the perfect segue into what I was going to ask you next, is if a filmmaker approaches you and says, why should I submit my film to a festival? Are festivals even important anymore? So why do you think a filmmaker should submit their film?
Okay, well, I actually had this conversation with a producer where when you go to Hollywood, let's say, and you're trying to sell a script or sell your movie or whatever, trying to get taken seriously. Do they look at festivals? Well, maybe not. Because the problem is, like I said, everybody under the sun has a festival now. I could say, yeah, Sur'vi got accepted into 60 festivals. Well, what are they? Well, I can list several of them the Orlando Film Festival, for instance. I can name a number of them that are really good festivals. I can also name a bunch of them that I have no clue because I wasn't there. And especially when you're talking about overseas, oh, hey, I won an award for this. Cool. It's a laurel. I can put it on it. I can use it to promote the movie. Was it an award factory? How do you know unless they have it on their website? Here are the awards that we gave out. But in some cases, it's congratulations, you won an award. Buy our trophy.
My favorite. Yeah. Hey, you won this award. For an extra fee, you can have a physical trophy.
Yeah.
No thanks.
It's a scam. Yeah.
And I will say I fell into that trap too with the Parker syndrome and seeing like, okay, you submit for best short film, then they have, oh, well, I could do best first time director or best drama. Then as I do it more and more, I'm like, wait a minute, this is adding up quite a bit. So I've learned much more from doing it, even with having this conversation with you and conversations we've had off air about festivals, being strategic and being smart about where to place your film is very important.
And there's no silver bullet. It's still kind of a crapshoot. You can enter into what seems to be the perfect festival for your film and they could turn you down. There are millions of reasons why you could be turned down and sometimes it is very disappointing. Like, but you're in my hometown. You should take my film, but they don't often look at that. I've been on the other end of things where I've had to, turn down films made by friends of mine, and it's like, it's nothing personal. It's just, it didn't, for whatever reason, fit the programming. And, so, it could be something as simple as we received 2 films that were very close in nature. And we got to choose one of them because we're not going to show both of them because they both kind of have the same theme and same type of plot. And we just like that one over another one. Or it could be the running time. If you make just a fantastic, solid 30-minute film, and I'm using that number because like Pensacon, we don't even take 30-minute films. 20 minutes is the tops. But let's say you make a 30-minute film, which I have in the past. You turn that in and the festival looks at it and goes, okay, yeah, that's pretty good. Sure. But we have 3 10-minute films that are just as good. We're going to program those 3 10-minute films because now we've got 3 filmmakers that are accepted instead of just the one. And, so my advice to filmmakers is make your film as short as possible. If you can do just a really great 5-minute film, do it because your chances of getting accepted are exponentially higher than if you have a long running time. Long running time short films, they need to be just amazing. They need to blow you out of the water. Otherwise, you're going to be passed over.
Runtime isn't everything, but it is also everything, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes any sense, because a great 5 to 10 minute film is much better than a mediocre 20 to 30 minute one any day of the week. So you mentioned the Pensacon Short Film Festival, and you've been on both sides
Mhm.
of the festival circuit. You've submitted your work from Sur'vi to a couple of your screenplays. You've also been running the Pensacon Short Film Festival, and also the festival for the Indie Fringe and Comedy Festival that happened here in town back in 2020, which that again, that was right before COVID, so that also seems like another lifetime ago.
Yeah.
What was it that made you want to get into the running a film festival side of things?
Well, a couple of things. One, I just love festivals. I really love film festivals. As a filmmaker, I love attending them. I love being able to see my film being screened, even if it's just a small projector in a room. I like being with an audience and being able to have my film shown. So I wanted to make sure or let me say, I wanted to provide that experience for other filmmakers, and to be able to say, hey, here's a means for your films to be shown. For Pensacon specifically, it was when I took over programming in the second year. That was one of the things that I wanted to do. That was kind of my baby. Was let's have that part of the programming. Let's add that to the reason why someone would buy a ticket to Pensacon, not just to see the celebrities or buy merchandise, but they get to see some films that they have no other means to see. And we've built up a pretty good audience that come back every year, wanting to see the movies that we show. The comedy festival was similar, other than the fact that it was comedy films instead of other genres. But it was one of those things that we needed a variety of programming, and a film festival was an obvious choice to provide. And for just the little festival that we did, it had good reception.
Well, the great thing about the Pensacon Short Film Festival, and you could say it about several others as well, but what I'll say about Pensacon specifically is that you get to see so many creative and
Yeah.
like a great variety of films too. Like there are the specific genres, don't get me wrong, but they can still add little nuances that make them so unique and fun and creative. Like there's been some incredible animated films that have been shown. Those are some of my favorites to watch because animation has always fascinated me since I was a kid, and seeing these creative filmmakers use that avenue and just create great stories, but also beautiful visuals too. And that it's you wouldn't get that if you didn't have festivals like these.
I believe the Best in Show winner this year was animated, if I'm not mistaken. We had it was claymation, stop motion animation, and it was phenomenal.
Now that you've been on both sides of the coin, if you will,
Hmm.
what's been the biggest lesson you've learned from running a festival that you've carried into submitting your work to festivals?
Read the rules. Um, like I said, we put down specific regulations for this. No films over 20 minutes. In fact, Film Freeway, fortunately, a couple of years ago, added a feature which I love, because they listen to people when they say we need this. We would put in the rules, no films over 20 minutes, and then we would get a 25, 30, 35-minute film, and we had had to say no. Just disqualified. We wouldn't even bother watching it usually because it's too long. It violates our rules. So yeah, and it's not fair when other people don't submit because of the rules for us to then make an exception and just say, yeah, we're going to ignore our rules. But Film Freeway added a feature to where you can actually lock it down to where you can't even submit a film that's longer than that. So that took that away from us. But also the genres, we had science fiction, fantasy, horror, comic book, or superhero, animation, documentaries, which reflect these other genres. And then we would get documentaries, for instance, that would be an environmentalist documentary, fantastic topic, not right for Pensacon. And it's like you're submitting to a comic book convention. What makes you think that they would want to see that topic or that they would accept that topic? It just, yeah, I don't know. Just read the rules and follow the rules. If it explicit, save yourself money. Don't submit to festivals that aren't going to accept your film. All you're doing is giving them money.
No, and I did want to go back to something you were saying earlier about why you wanted to have this specific festival, and it was because you wanted to give filmmakers an opportunity that you have had in the past. And I think that's what's great about filmmakers like you that want to pass on knowledge and experience, because that's really how the craft is going to continue for generations to come, is by teaching others how to do it. Like, that's how film started, is that it was invented, and then those who originally knew how to do it taught others how to do it, then they taught others how to do it, and it's just been passed on from... It's like, I was having this conversation with Vernon Wells a couple of weeks ago on the show about paying it forward in the industry, and that's how it's going to survive, is having those filmmakers who have the knowledge and experience and then pass on the opportunities and the knowledge down to the next generation. That's how it's going to continue.
Yeah. Verdon, by the way, is one of my favorite people. He's
Oh, he was incredible. I could listen to him talk for hours.
He has the most amazing voice. And just on a little side note, Jason Robbins, he was one of my actors in Sur'vi, and he did this voice that I can't even emulate. I can't get that low. And it was just an amazing voice. And the first thing was, if I ever make Sur'vi into a feature film, I need Vernon Wells to play his character's mentor. And just to see the two of them, the dynamic and those voices, yeah, it'd be phenomenal.
Oh, I would absolutely want to be there, even if it was just to watch. Like, that would just be incredible to see. But no, Vernon Wells was an interview that, like, I would have never expected to have been able to happen, but I'm so glad it did, because he's the perfect example of someone who's been in the industry for decades and has been, at the pinnacle of a genre of film that, like The Road Warrior is still like a standard for action and car chase films. And he's still acting into his 70s. You look at his IMDb, he's got like 30 projects in development. It's insane.
So badly.
Oh, I would love to work with him too. No, that would be an absolutely incredible experience. But as we start to wrap up here, I did want to ask you, because you've been in filmmaking now for so long, and you've done so many different things, from producing, directing, screenwriting. What is one piece of advice that you wish someone would have given you when you started out in the business?
Oh, I don't know. That's a tough one, because, like I said, I went to film school, and which there's a lot of debate right now whether or not, people should go to film school or just learn things on their own by doing, or learn from YouTube or whatever. I still think that was a good experience, that if you're serious about filmmaking, it's worthwhile to go, other than the cost. I think, truthfully, I do have some regrets for not moving to Los Angeles when I was young. There were a lot of reasons why I didn't, and I still have hopes of trying to get independent work done. And that was kind of one of the things that, I lived in Orlando, which was Hollywood East at that time. And it seemed to be the place to be, and it fizzled. And I know that as a screenwriter, during certain stages, it would have been better for me to have been out in Los Angeles, to be able to have meetings with people and be there at their beck and call. I didn't want to get caught up in the Hollywood machine though. That was one of the things. But as far as advice, I think that probably would have been some advice of get some friends together and scrape your money together, move out there, get an apartment, and just, six of you crash in an apartment together until you can, because people do that. I know people who have done that and they've gotten careers. And from a screenwriter and director point of view, I think that my career would have benefited from that if I had done that, but didn't have a mentor saying, you need to do that. Stop with all this other garbage, do this and go out there. So things are different now.
Yeah, they are. But you've become a mentor, which, for what it's worth. I know you've definitely been one to me, for ever since, God, we've known each other almost a decade now, because I think we met right before the first Pensacon. And since then, you've been an immense help to me as well as to other people. So I think there's something to be said for that.
I'm glad to hear that.
I always like to wrap up interviews with this, and I'm going to put you on the spot. Favorite movie of all time. Yeah. Favorite movie of all time.
Jaws.
You've been the first person to just instantly answer.
Today is the 47th anniversary of Jaws being released.
Yes, it is.
Well, okay. So I got a story about this. So the first film class I took in college, it was when I was still working on my AA in a community college in Oklahoma City, and the class was European film classics. So first day of class, the instructor, the teacher has us introduce ourselves, go around the room and say what our favorite movie was. Well, he started on the other end of the class and it went around, and there literally was a student in the class wearing a beret. I'm not kidding. So these were all these kind of artsy types that, I love the snooty films. And so, of course, there were all these, La Strada and The Bicycle Thief and, this and that, whatever. And it came to me and I stood up, introduced myself and said, my favorite movie is Jaws. And it was like someone opened an airlock and you could just, all the gasps in the room. And I defended it by saying, it's a classic adventure story in line with Moby Dick. It has iconic characters, phenomenal acting, a fantastic story, impeccable direction. I mean, it is one of the most perfect movies that you can have. And just because it was a blockbuster or the first blockbuster doesn't discount the qualities that made people like it in the first place. But yeah, I kind of set the stage there for me not being the most popular person in that class.
But you had the best taste in film, because you're right. Like, but just because it's a blockbuster doesn't make it, crappy popcorn movies. Like, Jaws is a standard bearer. Now looking back at it, like you said, 47 years later, it's still like a standard bearer of film, just from directing to characters. That theme song is so iconic. Like, it's top 5 most iconic theme of all time.
And not only just the shark music, but the entire score is amazing. Just, the scene where the ferry boat is coming in onto Amity Island, carrying all the tourists on for 4th of July. That piece of music is just wonderful. And there's other pieces throughout the film that just capture the tone and the mood just perfectly. John Williams, I don't know, he's just a master.
He's the greatest composer of all time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like, and to me, there's no, like, Hans Zimmer is great. There's some great current composers, but John Williams is number one. And you look at his resume and you cannot dispute it, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a topic of another podcast.
Yeah, that's true. That could be our next topic, is movie scores. But yeah, last thing, do you have any website, social media, any upcoming work that you'd like to plug?
Well, let's see. I mentioned Blackwater Blues. It's not available to the public, but it's getting ready to be shopped around to streamers. So hopefully someone will pick it up, and we'll see where that goes. I do have a book. It's a novella, like a long short story, that's available on Amazon called The Melting Man. So if you search for my name, Stephen Wise, The Melting Man, you'll find it on Amazon. It's pretty cheap. Yeah, you can find me on Facebook under Stephen Wise, and I'm on Twitter, so on and so forth. So
Awesome. Well, sir, thank you so much, as always, for taking the time. I know it's been forever since we've done a show together, so it doesn't need to be 2 years before we do another podcast. So, no, always a pleasure to chat.
Some movies to work on too in the meantime. So
yeah, that is true. No, we'll have other reasons to do podcasts. So, no, it's always great, chatting with you. As I said, you've been an immense and valuable help to me, not just with filmmaking, but you've been a great friend to me as well over the last several years. So I appreciate it.
Well, thank you again for having me on the show. It's been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me play our outro music here. If you want to subscribe to the show, just head over to linktree.com/featureprezpod. You can find social media where you can listen to the podcast. And don't forget, we are live every Monday night on YouTube at 8 p.m. Central Time. So that's going to do it for this week's show. We'll see you guys back here next week for another fun episode of Feature Presentation with Derek Diamond.